Welcome to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. NASA's Ingenuity Mars helicopter hitched a ride to the Red Planet on the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover, which landed in Jezero Crater on February 18th. Now, the rover is getting ready to drop the helicopter off so it can attempt the first powered, controlled flights on another planet. Today, we'll bring you up to speed on the team's plans. I'm your host, Raquel Villanueva. To tell us about the upcoming milestones and the helicopter's test flights are Lori Glaze, Director of NASA's Planetary Science Division, Bob Balaram, Ingenuity Chief Engineer, Hovard Grip, Ingenuity Chief Pilot, Farah Alabay, Perseverance Integration Lead for Ingenuity, and Bobby Braun, Director for Planetary Science at JPL. For anyone watching who'd like to submit a question, you can do so by using the Mars helicopter hashtag. Our phone lines are now open to the media, and you can ask questions by pressing *1 and enter the queue. To start, I'd like to welcome Lori Glaze. Thanks for getting us started, Lori.
You bet. Thank you, Raquel. We're here today to celebrate great engineering achievements that required hard work, perseverance, and above all, ingenuity. The Perseverance rover carries with it the most advanced suite of science instruments we've ever sent to Mars, as well as several technology demonstrations, including the Ingenuity helicopter. Perseverance and Ingenuity are all of NASA missions. And by that, I mean they cut across science, technology, human space flight, and aeronautics. In fact, when the decision was made to add a small helicopter to the Mars 2020 rover mission, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory looked to our Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate for their expertise in rotorcraft aerodynamics. A small team of NASA helicopter experts assisted JPL in verifying that Ingenuity could fly in Mars's super thin atmosphere, and they also helped analyze the helicopter's design. When I reflect on Perseverance and Ingenuity, I not only think about the future science and possibilities that'll be enabled by these two engineering marvels, but also about those two words and how they represent the core human characteristics that got us where we are today. The very first wheeled rover vehicle to rove on another planet was Sojourner, which landed on Mars in 1997 and paved the way for a new era of Mars exploration. Sojourner redefined what we thought was possible on the surface of Mars and completely transformed our approach to how we explore there. That small rover enabled all the missions to follow, and now Perseverance, the size of a small car, is able to carry other technology demonstrations like Ingenuity, which will further expand our horizons. At NASA, we strive to anticipate what scientists are going to need to do great science in the future, and the technology demonstrations, by their very nature, do this. It's a high-risk, high-reward approach that allows us to test capabilities we can improve on later, which could also advance science on future missions. Ingenuity is a limited-time project. It will have 31 Earth days to attempt to be the first helicopter to fly on another planet. It isn't intended to collect science, but because its mission is so focused, it is, at its core, innovative. And that innovation is the heart of tech demonstrations. Another technology demonstration on board Perseverance includes MOXIE, which will test technology to convert atmospheric carbon dioxide into oxygen, which could help us enable human missions to Mars in the future. Tech demos related to the rover's entry, descent, and landing, like range trigger, allowed for precise timing of parachute deployment and helped us to avoid hazards on landing day. An earlier demonstration of the medley technology for Curiosity's landing enabled us to advance our understanding of atmospheric entry during the Perseverance landing. And beyond tech demos, Perseverance is loaded with other amazing technology integral to its science mission, including a complex sampling and caching system that will drill for samples of rock and soil to be collected by our future Mars sample return missions. Ingenuity will open new possibilities and will spark questions for the future about what we could accomplish with an aerial explorer. Could we image areas not visible from space or that a rover couldn't reach, like shadowed craters with seasonal water flow? Could a helicopter scout ahead for rovers and help plot the most efficient course for the best science? Could we support future human missions with aerial capabilities? Those are questions for another day, but tech demos give us the leeway to be creative and test new things. Without Sojourner, there is no Perseverance, and without Ingenuity, there wouldn't be the future aerial explorers we're hoping will be enabled by the coming months' flight. We're looking forward to seeing how our little helicopter does on the surface of Mars, and we know people around the world are eager to join us for that exciting 31-day demonstration. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bob Balaram to tell us about some of the engineering milestones that made it possible for Ingenuity to reach Mars. We've already learned a lot just through that process. Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Laurie. Could I have the first image, please? Yes. So when we see this image of Ingenuity, what comes to my mind is that it's really a first unique aircraft designed to fly a powered flight on another planet. And of all planets, it's Mars, which has the thinnest atmosphere, just 1% of Earth. And it's a very unique engineering design with its 4-foot diameter blades, counter-rotating blades, its little solar panel on top, and a fuselage that's filled with all kinds of electronics, everything from advanced items to off-the-shelf items, all carefully tailored and screened for use on Mars. It's a very unique aircraft that is capable of that kind of flight with the blade spinning at 40 RPM, 40 times a second, and really being able to take off in that thin air of Mars. But I also see a spacecraft. This is, in effect, an aircraft that also happens to be a spacecraft. It has survived launch. It has survived the journey through space with vacuum and radiation. It has survived the entry and descent and landing onto the surface with its on the bottom of the Perseverance rover. And it has survived all of the challenges and design issues that are necessary for a spacecraft. But most of all, I think of Ingenuity also as an experimental aircraft. Here is in the long tradition of experimental aircraft that started all the way from the Wright brothers, who are able to bring aerial mobility as a dimension for us to be able to travel here on Earth. In the same way, we are hoping that Ingenuity also allows us to expand and open up aerial mobility on Mars. Now, the Wright brothers in 1903, they flew this with a small spruce wood and fabric system. We in Ingenuity, with all our high-tech materials and carbon fiber skins and exotic metals, we are very proud to honor that experimental aircraft from long ago by carrying a small piece of fabric on Ingenuity. Here you see engineers installing that small piece of fabric. This fabric is from the original aircraft that flew at Kitty Hawk. The Wright brothers were auctioning pieces of this to raise money for their future efforts. And we thank the folks at Dayton History who let us honor that original pioneers with this adding this piece to our Ingenuity aircraft. It has been a long journey, and everything from test programs that had failures in the early days, and you can roll the video, all the way culminating in actually building a Ingenuity flight model that is flight-worthy and can go to Mars. We have done a lot of testing, everything from the mechanisms to going into our 25-foot space chamber, which simulates the atmosphere of Mars, where we did a number of flights to characterize the performance of the system, to understand how well it can control itself, and to do a whole number of maneuvers to make sure that we knew how this thing could fly here on Mars. A lot of testing, that everything that we could possibly do here on Earth has been done, and now it's time for us to take that same vehicle to Mars and subject it to the ultimate test. So there are still a number of challenges ahead. We are at a milestone right now where we are on the surface. We have successfully exposed ourselves to the atmosphere of Mars. We are right now in the process of having the rover drive us to a location, which will be our airfield. There will be a long 10-day sequence of careful, critical deployments. And then there will be the deposition of the helicopter on the surface. And then there will be that first exposure to sunlight when we have to charge the batteries by ourselves, where we're no longer part of the Perseverance rover and connected safely. And we're completely on our own, fully autonomous, waiting to receive commands. We will go through a number of days of commissioning, approximately a week, where we test out sensors, we test out servo mechanisms, we test the motors to make sure they spin right, and we'll be very methodical and event-driven as this engineering experiment unfolds. And then we will be at a point where we'll undertake our first flight, and then we'll progressively undertake more aggressive flights once we understand and analyze all the behavior from that first flight. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Howard, who will tell us more about our first flight.
All right, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about where we've chosen to fly the helicopter. Immediately after the rover landed on February 18th, just within a couple of hours, we started to search for a good place to drop off the helicopter. And when I say good place, what I mean specifically is we wanted to find something that we called an airfield, which is an area where it is safe for the helicopter to take off and also safe for the helicopter to land again after a flight. So that area naturally needs to be flat, and it needs to have few obstacles, rocks and the like, that could pose a danger to the helicopter on landing. And that area should also be situated within a larger flight zone. So flight zone is where the flights themselves will happen. And we're also looking for something relatively flat there. And we're looking for something that has enough texture. That means things that the helicopter can look at with its cameras while it's flying in order to keep track of where it's at. So we began to look for an airfield and a surrounding flight zone first using satellite imagery. And then, as they became available, images taken by the rover itself after it landed. And we began to realize that we might just have a really great airfield right in front of our noses. In fact, we have a satellite image, if we can pull that up, that shows where the rover landed, as well as the flight zone and the airfield. And you can see it's just right north of where we landed. And once the rover started driving, we were able to get even better images of this area. And we have a second image here that shows what the rover saw with its navigation cameras, looking directly up the airfield, or up the flight zone with the airfield in the foreground. And using these images and other images, we really scoured this area. We looked at every little rock and pebble within that airfield and measured it before we finally were comfortable saying, yes, this is going to be our home base for the helicopter. So what you're looking at there is in fact the first airfield on another planet, and we're planning to deploy the helicopter right in the middle of that. So next I want to talk a little bit about our first flight and what that's going to look like starting from this airfield that we've picked here. So first of all, the first flight is special. It's by far the most important flight that we plan to do. It'll be the first powered flight by an aircraft on another planet. And we've, in fact, met most of our goals for this project just by getting to the point where we are right now. And we'll declare complete mission success if we do this first flight that we're going to attempt. Now, the flight itself will consist of a takeoff and then a climb to an altitude of 3 meters. And then we will hover in place for about 30 seconds and make a turn with the helicopter while we're hovering, and then come down and land again. And we have an engineering simulation here that shows what that flight might look like above the airfield that we have just chosen. Now, when the helicopter goes to fly like this, a few hours ago, it's already received instructions from us on Earth that describes exactly what that flight should look like. The detailed trajectory that it's going to follow, how fast it's going to follow that trajectory, where and when it's going to turn, when it's going to take picture, etc. So it knows at that point exactly what we would like it to do. But it has to work very hard during the flight itself in order to make that happen. In particular, it takes images of the ground below it at a rate of 30 images per second and analyzes those in order to track the features on the ground to see how it is moving across the ground. And it combines that with other sensor measurements in order to make tiny adjustments to the controls, 500 times per second, to stay exactly on the trajectory that we've prescribed for it, and to fight off disturbances that tries to take it away from that trajectory, like winds and gusts. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Farah, who's going to talk about how the rover will be supporting the helicopter during the flight experiment.
Thanks, Håvard. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how we get from where we are today to that first flight early in April and how the rover team is supporting the Ingenuity mission. So if we look at our first picture here, I love this picture. We took this picture on Sunday on Mars using our robotic arm, and we peeked under the belly of the rover. And what you're looking at here is the debris shield on the ground. That's the debris shield that protected our helicopter as we were landing on Mars last month. But what's the coolest thing is you can see Ingenuity there, all tucked in below the rover, doing okay. Everything is all in place, and she's ready to get to the surface of Mars. So what's going on right now is that we're driving to that helicopter deployment area that Håvard just talked about. That's going to take another couple of days. And then when we get there, we're going to go through a series of steps to get the helicopter from its current horizontal position all the way to being vertical and then being dropped on the ground. That's a very prescribed and meticulous process where we separate, there's a number of launch locks and attachments that we separate one by one. We're going to be imaging each time, making sure that the helicopter is in the expected position before dropping it on the ground. So that's going to take multiple days. with the most stressful day, at least for me, is going to be that last day where we finally separate the helicopter and drop Ingenuity on the ground. And if we cue up the video here, you can see the testing that we did in the Mars yard, which is our version of Mars here on Earth when we do all our testing, where we dropped that helicopter and backed away from it very slowly. So on that last day, we released the last restraint and slowly drive away from the helicopter, making sure that we don't hit it or anything. And what's most stressful is that once the helicopter is separated, we actually have to drive away from it within 25 hours. Because as Bob mentioned, the helicopter needs photons, it needs sun on its solar panels to charge its batteries, and it can only survive one Martian night without that. So that's going to be a very stressful period, but what I look forward to the most is after we do that drive, we're going to get that first shot of Ingenuity on the surface of Mars on her own there, and I just cannot wait to get that first picture. I think it's going to be a really great moment for the entire team. So after we've dropped Ingenuity on the ground, as Bob mentioned, the helicopter is going to go through a series of commissioning steps, right? Wiggling the blades, doing a bunch of checkouts. From our end, the rover is going to slowly be backing away, imaging Ingenuity every step of the way to what we call the rover observation location. Think of it as a lookout point. Like if you ever go to a national park and you have a beautiful view, you want to park there and look. Our rover is going to do that, and our beautiful view is going to be Ingenuity. And we are going to do our very best to capture Ingenuity in flight. We're going to be taking images. We're hoping to take video. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's hard. Space is hard, and in this case, we have 2 missions that have their own separate clocks, and we got to get that timing right to get that first flight. But we're trying very, very hard to catch that and get that. So before I hand it over here, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an anecdote, a little bit of a personal side to this. So on the rover side, we're kind of a small team supporting the Ingenuity team. All of us have our own day jobs supporting the rover mission itself, and all of us were asked at some point, hey, can you help make this mission happen? I still remember the phone call where I was told, hey, Farah, we know you're busy, but there's this helicopter. Do you want to help with operations? And of course, my answer was absolutely yes. And it's been such fun. Hovard and Bob, it's been an honor for our team to be able to support you and your team and to be part of this historic event. I really appreciate you taking us on your journey, and I just cannot wait to spend the next 40 or so days with you here, getting Ingenuity on the ground and supporting you on that first flight.
Thank you, Farah, and the entire Mars 2020 Perseverance team for being so helpful and giving us those precious month on Mars for us to do our engineering experiment. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a great collaboration. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Bobby, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the team and wrap things up.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Before I get started, I just wanted to say a little bit about my former community in Boulder. I've been at JPL for about a year now, and prior to that, I had the privilege of serving as the Dean of Engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I just want to say that, from all of us here, that our hearts go out to that community today. Boulder's a special place for many reasons, one of which is the connection to aerospace and space exploration. In fact, JPL has many partners in Boulder and across Colorado. And so to my former students, the faculty and staff that I worked with every day, and the whole Boulder community, I just want to say that we stand with you and know that you'll get through this. Thank you. This past year, our world and the lab has largely been about perseverance. But as we approach April, while we continue persevering, it feels a lot to me like the month of Ingenuity. And it's Ingenuity and this team that are primed to make space history in April, marking humanity's Wright brothers moment, the first flight of a powered craft on Mars. Ingenuity is an apt descriptor for the helicopter, but also for this team. I've watched them closely. They're close-knit, resourceful, creative, imaginative, a diverse team of innovators. And I want to take just a moment on behalf of the lab to thank the whole team for what they've already accomplished, what they've already taught us about perseverance and ingenuity as they traveled the road to Mars. Now, this team would be the first to tell you that while they may be able to fly in a near vacuum, they couldn't build Ingenuity in one. And in fact, we've had a great set of partners in this endeavor. With their deep knowledge of rotorcraft, the NASA Ames Research Center has been a source of invaluable assistance to this project. NASA Langley Research Center made significant contributions in the area of computational fluid dynamics. And in addition, I'd like to thank some of our partners at AeroVironment, at Qualcomm, and at Lockheed Martin. As Dr. Glaze mentioned earlier, Ingenuity is a tech demo. And historically speaking, it wasn't that long ago that another Martian tech demo was assembled in a clean room only a few hundred meters from where we are today. Sojourner. Sojourner demonstrated the value of surface mobility. And that tech demo mission was followed by the great scientific discoveries of Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity. Now, we've now added the name of Perseverance to that impressive list, a series of increasingly sophisticated science emissaries that have advanced our knowledge of Mars and taught us a little bit more about our home planet Earth. They've brought Mars home to all of us. And to think, it all started with a tech demo. In this same spirit, I can only imagine where we may be a decade or so from now. If we can scout and scientifically survey Mars from the air with its thin atmosphere, we can certainly do the same in a number of other destinations across the solar system, like Titan or Venus. We can provide higher resolution measurements, perhaps from orbit, fly farther, perhaps, than a rover could traverse, or access sites that are difficult to reach by these other means. The future of powered flight in space exploration is solid and strong. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the location that Perseverance is headed towards, and from which it will watch over Ingenuity's historic flight. The team has decided to name this location on Mars in honor of our longtime colleague, mentor, and leader here at JPL, Jacob Van Zyl. Jacob passed away unexpectedly in August of 2020, about a month after the Perseverance launch. He joined JPL in 1986 and served crucial roles over a 33-year career that touched nearly all aspects of the science operations that we conduct at JPL. From ushering in the use of synthetic aperture radars for Earth science, to leading the teams responsible for making breakthrough discoveries in the cosmos, Jacob was a Renaissance man. He seemed to do it all. He contributed to the success of the Spitzer and Kepler space telescopes, to Juno's mission to Jupiter, to the Dawn mission to the asteroids, Cassini to Saturn, and InSight Mars lander. Jacob was also a pioneer and an innovator himself, who helped develop the Marco mission, which were the world's first interplanetary small spacecraft, which flew as a tech companion along with the InSight lander. When Ingenuity was conceived here at JPL, it was Jacob who pushed this team forward. A native of Namibia, Jacob came to America in 1982 as a graduate student at Caltech, where he earned a master's and PhD in electrical engineering, and he began to work at JPL immediately thereafter. He was passionate about sharing the excitement of space exploration with the people of Namibia, across Africa, and across the globe. With his wife, Calfee, he returned again and again to his homeland to conduct STEM outreach on behalf of the space program. Now, Jacob was a dear friend, a mentor, and a devoted teammate to me and to all of us across JPL. It remains hard for many of us to imagine our community without his light and smile. Ingenuity was one of Jacob's final projects at JPL, and it would not exist today without his leadership, dedication, and patience. He was the guiding force watching over this team, his team, and he would have been so proud to see the product of this team's hard work. On behalf of all of us at NASA, at Caltech, and at JPL, and in particular on behalf of the Perseverance and Ingenuity teams, it's my honor to announce that today we are recognizing Jacob's sustained and significant contributions to space science by naming the location on Mars from which Perseverance will look over Ingenuity's historic flight as the Van Zyl Overlook. May he continue to watch over this team, and may his memory continue to guide us, encourage us to be bolder and dare mighty things. Thank you, Raquel. Back to you.
Thank you for that beautiful tribute, Bobby. And we are now ready to take media questions. Remember to press *1 to get put in the queue, and please direct your questions to one of our panelists. We're also taking questions through the Mars helicopter hashtag. To start off on the phone lines is Marcia Dunn from the Associated Press.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon. Two quick questions. Could I have a little bit of a timeline in April as to when you think you'll be meeting your milestones, and what target date at this point, no earlier than date, do you think the first flight might occur? And the fabric sample from the Wright Flyer, could you tell me how large of a piece of sample that is that flew on Ingenuity? Thank you.
You take that, Bob?
Yes, so let me take that. So our current best estimate of when the flight could happen is no earlier than about April 8th. But things are fluid. As I mentioned, we are very event and experiment driven. So that could be changed by a few days in either direction. But that's the best guess that we have right now is April 8th. The piece of fabric is about the size of a postage stamp. And so it's really a small little element that's been sealed and wrapped in appropriately, and it's been attached to a small cable on the underside of the solar panel. And it's called Pride of the West. That's the kind of fabric that was used on the original flyer. And it's like, that's what's there on Ingenuity right now.
Great. And up next, we have Bob Brinkman from UPI.
Hi, yeah, this is Paul. I was wondering, I know NASA doesn't like to get ahead of itself, but if Ingenuity is a total success, how soon do you think we could see another helicopter on Mars? I guess this would be for Lori or Bobby. I mean, I'm wondering if NASA would seek to add a new mission for that, or is it possible that the sample return mission could add an aircraft? Thanks.
I can take that one if you like, to at least start, and then maybe Bobby might want to expand. But from the NASA perspective, I think this is going to be really, like I said, an enabling capability that we're going to demonstrate, hopefully with the flights over the next several weeks. As far as identifying a specific opportunity in the near future, what we like to do within NASA is to provide competitive opportunities to our community. And so we do offer those on a periodic basis, and would hope that the community will see this as a great opportunity to start thinking about aerial platforms as a potential way to really expand our Mars exploration. So that's the most likely pathway in the immediate future.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, it's a very analogous situation to when Sojourner first flew and did its thing on Mars. At that time, Spirit and Opportunity were not in the plan, but after the Sojourner success, which proved the ability of surface mobility, there was a change in plans and an evolution in people's thinking. And it's quite possible that we could have a similar evolution here, where future autonomous aerial systems could come into play.
Thank you for your answers. Up next, we have Mike Wall from space.com.
Thank you all for doing this. Just a quick question. Is that like 31-day kind of mission length for Ingenuity? Is that a hard deadline, or is there a world that where you could see Ingenuity operating beyond that? And if it performs really well on those initial flights, like actually doing some work for Perseverance, helping it scout and so forth. Thanks.
Bobby, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. It's the month of Ingenuity, right? And we're very confident that we can conduct our technology demonstration and meet all of its objectives in that month. We also have a science mission to conduct, a very important science mission that's going to gather the samples that will eventually come back to Earth as part of the Mars sample return campaign. So that month is our window to conduct the technology demonstration experiment, and we're confident that we can do so.
Thank you, Bobby. Up next, we have Irene Klotz from Aviation Weekly.
Thanks very much. My question is for Bob Balaram. You mentioned the flight testing in the chamber, of course. What do you think is the riskiest part of actually flying this on Mars? Is it dust, or is there some other element that obviously you couldn't test for on Earth that kind of has the team most curious about what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge will be that we are flying in the atmosphere of Mars, which has its own dynamics, its own winds, wind gusts, and so forth. And these are things which we tested with wind tunnels in our chamber. We have some confidence that everything will be good, but there's nothing that beats actually being in the real environment of Mars to actually see how well the flight and the aerodynamics actually works out. There are also other challenges related to surviving the night. We have a thermal system for this very small system, which is it's difficult to keep a small system warm through the night, as you can imagine. And so just to see how well that thermal system protects us through the night, how well does our solar panel work? There are a number of engineering aspects before we even get to the flight. But when it comes to the actual flying, it's really the winds and the dynamics of how all of that interacts with the helicopter that would be the most interesting thing for us to learn.
Thank you, Bob. Up next, we have Joey Roulette from The Verge.
Hey, thanks. I was just wondering, and this is for anybody who would like to answer, is there anything that you guys have learned or anything that Perseverance has experienced on Mars since it landed that has changed your expectations for Ingenuity's flight? And also, is there anything that would prevent Ingenuity or save Ingenuity from blowing over if there's a gust of wind or something once Perseverance backs away from it? Thanks.
Yeah, I can take that. So we are learning more and more about the specific winds and atmosphere and temperatures and how dusty the place is, how much. So we're getting a lot of information that is helping us finalize our plans. But there is really no concern in the sense of anything blowing over. The forces are really quite small in terms of having the helicopter topple over when it's on the ground. So really all the challenges are related to aerial flight, and we will get more information all the way up to the day of the flight. We have a weather forecast team that is telling us every day what the winds will look like as to the best estimate and the best knowledge. We will know what the solar power looks like during a commissioning phase. So we'll be fully prepped up for that first day of flight, and right now things are looking fairly reasonable. There's nothing that stands out as a unique challenge or a unique hazard in anything.
Thank you. And up next on the phone lines is Issam Ahmed from AFP.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. My question was about that most perilous phase, which Farah Ali Bey described. What might happen? Could you just dig into that a bit more about what the issues are and what might happen if Ingenuity doesn't get the charge it requires? Does it just die then? Is it irretrievable?
Yeah, sure. So that last sort of stressful phase that I was talking about is the deployment of Ingenuity to the ground. So think of it as Ingenuity is vertical below the rover, and we separate its last connection to the rover, and that's the connection that gives it energy, that keeps it warm overnight. So that timeline that I talked about is 25 hours in terms of how long our batteries will last from our models without getting any sunlight on the helicopter. So from the rover point of view, that's a reasonable timeline. We're not talking about, we just have to drive 5 meters. It's something that we do every day on Mars right now. But still, we are giving ourselves as many shots as we can to get that drive off because it has such huge implications on the helicopter. So what we're doing is that we're dropping the helicopter on the ground. We're actually going to have ground in the loop. Us humans here are going to be able to interact and see what happened with that drop, and then we'll command a drive away from that helicopter. If that drive doesn't happen on that day, we as a team will have overnight to debug and to figure out what happened and drive off the next morning, and Ingenuity will still be okay. We have a great team of engineers, and I'm sure that whatever Mars throws at us, we'll be able to deal with it. And we sure have practiced a lot for that day to make sure that we get Ingenuity safe on the ground.
Thank you.
I can add a little bit to that. As long as they do get off eventually during the next day, we have a pretty good chance of charging up a battery. It may not be a full day of charge, but it'll be partial. So if there's any delay over and beyond 25 hours, it's not necessarily that, but that's what the team is making sure that we don't get shaded under the rover for that longer time. But if they can get off the next day, even if it's a little bit late, we should be okay.
Thank you for your answers. And we have social media questions coming in as well. On YouTube from Gaming Nerd 353 asks, how high do you think it will go up in Mars' atmosphere? And if it works, how will it help in future missions to Mars? Howard?
Yeah, so the first flight that we're going to do that I talked about earlier, we're going to go 3 meters high. And then our nominal flight out height for the remaining flights is 5 meters above the ground. So that's mostly where we're going to be. Now, as far as the potential that this has for future exploration, you can kind of think of it as, we use drones and helicopters here on Earth for all sorts of things that they're more suitable for than land-based vehicles, right? So you can just imagine being able to have that same capability on Mars, flying around on Mars. And that could be for reconnaissance purposes, taking pictures to scout out areas, potential science targets for future rovers or even future astronauts on Mars. Or it could be carrying its own science instruments into areas where you can't get with a land-based vehicle. So that's the kind of potential that this technology could have for the future.
And Hovard, for our American audiences, could you convert the meters too, please?
Yeah, so it's about, it's about 15 feet. Is the height of the most of the flights.
Great, thank you. And up next on the phone lines is Robert Hotz with the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I thank you for the briefing. I have 2 questions. And the first perhaps to Bobby Brown. Can you just give us a program cost for Ingenuity, separate from the overall mission cost of Perseverance? Number one. Number two, and as a subset of that, can you give us any idea about the development cost of these remarkable helicopter blades that you all have developed to handle the very thin Martian atmosphere? So number one, the cost question. And then number two, is there any technology transfer or relationship in an engineering sense between the development of the rotorcraft for Mars and the development of the rotorcraft or hovercraft that's being prepared for the Dragonfly mission to Titan? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'll take the first question, and then I'll turn the rest over, I think, to Bob. But the program cost for Ingenuity was on the order of $80 million. And that's separate from the Perseverance cost itself. Bob, do you want to talk about the blades and their design?
It's a little bit difficult to separate out, a particular element because this design was done in a very integrated, holistic sense where a lot of engineering trades across multiple subsystems, power, blade design, fuselage design, thermals. So it's very difficult to isolate the cost. So I don't think there's an easy way for anybody to come up with an answer as to what the particular blade, technology work ended up costing. With regard to your second question about Dragonfly, so yes, we have been in conversations with them. They've been especially interested in getting some of our early thoughts on what kind of testing we did. After all, part of the invention here was not only to build Ingenuity, but to build a test program for a first-of-a-kind system, there are no, places to go to sort of look up what should you test next. So they have, some of the engineers have been in consultation with us as to what kind of testing would make sense. So we have given them some of our inputs. And so that's the nature of the interaction at this point. And I'm sure as their program matures and they go into other phases of their development, there will be folks on the Ingenuity team who will be able to offer help and guidance to the extent that we can.
And we can also get Lori in here. Lori, would you like to answer some of the questions as well? And we can also get it repeated for you.
Sure. No, I'll just expand a little bit on Bob's comment there. That I'm really glad to see, across NASA, we like to learn from each other, and we've got this great experience and expertise here from the Ingenuity team, and of course the Dragonfly team is just getting started on their development of working on the quadcopter, the large rotorcraft that they're planning to send to Titan. It's going to be really interesting to see how this kind of capability will scale up. Of course, there are similarities and differences between both of the different flight systems. And of course, the environments are very, very different. But I think, what we learn from this experiment will definitely feed forward, and really happy that we're, having this ability to take the information that we learned from one mission and move it on and take that to the next mission.
Thank you, Lori. And we also have costs in the Ingenuity press kit that is available online as well. And up next on the phone line is Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Yeah, hey, thank you. I think this is probably for Bob. Is the limit, the 5-meter maximum altitude, is that just based on general principle being safe, or is there anything to do with the nature of the Martian atmosphere that makes you not want to go higher? And a second question, real quick, if the device flips over on its side or something during the landing, would it even be possible to use the rover and its robot arm to maybe come to the rescue and flip it back over, or would that just be all she wrote if something like that happens? Thanks.
Yeah, let me ask Howard to comment on the height limitations, and then I'll get back to the flip over question.
Yeah, so the nominal height of 5 meters is, there are a couple of factors there. One of them is that we have a laser rangefinder that measures the distance to the ground. And we've characterized that up to a certain range, and we want to have, a sufficient amount of margin on that so that we're completely safe for our nominal flights. So that's part of where that comes from. It's not really the atmosphere. The helicopter, physically would be capable of attaining higher altitudes, and it could, in principle, go higher, currently as designed. And there may be cases where if everything goes well during our nominal flights, where we might stretch things a little bit beyond, the nominal heights.
Yeah, and regarding the question, if for whatever reason there is a unfortunate case where the Ingenuity doesn't land quite right and, tips over, it's quite likely that the damage, especially to our blades, will be such that it really doesn't make sense to, try to do anything further at that point. So there really is no merit to actually having Perseverance come back and right-side it up. It would be most probably be so damaged at that point that it's really not flyable anymore. Of course, it's all been designed so that it doesn't do that, so we don't have that expectation unless it's a really bad day during the test flight program.
Great, thank you. And up next we have Leonard David from Inside Outer Space.
Thanks very much. I think we touched a little bit on this, but maybe for Bobby, and thanks for being here in Boulder. I appreciate the nod to the community. The potential of kind of a device like this being used in an astronaut toolkit. I mean, what kind of range might be possible given a successful test of this demonstration? And then the other thing is, how long-lived is this vehicle, and is it conceivable that it could be used in the Mars sample return program?
Okay, that was to me. Thanks, Leonard. So as you know, we have robotic assistants that are paired with astronauts today, like on the International Space Station, for example. And so there has been quite a bit of work done in how humans and robots could work together for exploration purposes. We've been pathfinding some of that on the International Space Station, but certainly as humans venture out at some point, you could imagine that occurring. I dropped the other part of your question. I apologize.
How long-lived would the vehicle be, and is it conceivable if everything is still operational on it? Can it survive for years before the Mars sample return mission gets underway?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah, let me address that. It's not conceivable. Let's just be straight about it. So, Sojourner, by the way, lasted about, if I remember right, it lasted about a few months on Mars. It was a tech demo, right? And it did not have the long life that Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, and we believe Perseverance will have. And in much the same way, this is a tech demo. It's been sent to Mars to prove the capability. And we believe we can prove that capability. We can meet all the flight test objectives in the month of Ingenuity. So there's not really a need for that long life. It hasn't been designed for that purpose. And so there's really no way I could conceive that it could last through the harsh conditions on Mars for the length of time it would take to participate in some future mission.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks, Bobby. Lori, would you like to weigh in on this question as well?
I think Bobby's done a really good job of answering both aspects of the questions. I'm not sure I have much to add, but as he said, it's not designed to last for very long. It's a technology demonstration. It's designed to last as long as we need to prove out this incredible capability.
Right, thank you. And up next is a social media question. Akashan on Twitter asks, when can we expect to see some results, videos, or pics from the Ingenuity helicopter? Farah?
So we'll be taking videos and images, as soon, every day, every step of the way. But obviously, videos and images are high volume, high bandwidth, to get down to Earth. So on the days while we're flying, for example, we're going to prioritize getting the helicopter data down first. And that's the most important. That's what tells us if we've been successful or not. And then behind that will come the images and videos. So for every major milestone, we're expecting probably within the day or two, depending on how our bandwidth looks, that we'll be getting those images and sharing them with the public. Everything is available on mars.nasa.gov/perseverance.
Great, thank you. And up next we have Paul Gross from WDIV-TV in Detroit.
Well, thank you very much for taking my question. I actually have two, and I'll ask them separately because they're different questions. First question is, what was the greatest engineering challenge in designing Ingenuity? Was it, for example, getting enough lift in the thin Martian atmosphere or maintaining enough power so it could even fly? I mean, what was the greatest engineering challenge? And then I'll have one more question.
Yeah, I can take that. I think the biggest challenge was to control the mass, the total weight of this aircraft so that it would be as light as possible. The gravity on Mars helps a bit in terms of flying. It's about 40% of what you have here on Earth. But anything that gets heavy just won't be able to lift off in that thin atmosphere despite your best attempt at aerodynamics. So to keep a design where every part was carefully weighed and managed and constraints were put on the design process to make sure we didn't get a mass growth that would make flight not possible. That was the major challenge through the entire design process.
And my second question, and I'm asking this because one of you alluded to this earlier, and I'm asking you this because I'm a meteorologist, but you mentioned about a weather forecast team providing you forecasts on Mars. Now, I know we get some weather data from Mars. I was not aware that you were trying to forecast the weather on Mars. Can you discuss that process and how often are you getting briefings and just describe that whole part of the process?
Yeah, let me discuss part of it, and then I can turn to Howard as a pilot of the Ingenuity to talk more. So we look to weather for two main reasons. One is we want to get some sense of how much energy we're going to use keeping things warm. Is it a breezy day on Mars? Is it a breezy night on Mars? So that allows us to forecast, what thermostat settings we need and how much power we're going to use to keep ourselves warm. The second one, which is what a pilot would care about. And in that context, Howard, do you want to talk about you as the Ingenuity pilot? What are you looking for and how are you getting it?
Yeah, so there are two particular weather products that we look to. One is the density at the time of flight. And fortunately on Mars, things tend to be very repeatable from one day to the next. And so we get these density curves that show us how the density varies throughout us all. And it allows us to project into the future what it's going to look like when the time to fly comes. And the way that we use that is, first of all, the density has to be within a range where it's flyable. And then we also adjust the rotor speed of the helicopter according to what the predicted density is at the time of flight to be optimal for that. And the second weather product that we're interested in is wind.
Air density, correct?
Say it again?
For the benefit of the others that are listening, you're talking about the air density?
That's correct, yes, the atmospheric density. And then the second thing that we're interested in is wind. And we don't use wind directly for planning a flight other than to make a go, no-go decision. So we want to have a reasonable amount of confidence that the wind is within a certain range where we don't exceed the airspeeds that the helicopter is designed for.
Well, I hope those forecasts are reliable. Thank you all very much.
Great, thank you. And up next, we have Gina Sanseri from ABC News.
Good afternoon. I'm just curious, when you make the decision to fly, what will the audio loops be like? Will you have a no-go countdown like we get for launches and other events? How does that work?
Yes. Yeah, I can take that. So basically, since Ingenuity operations are done a day ahead of the actual flight, so we will be looking at weather patterns, our engineering performance on the days leading up to the flight. And then we will make a go, no-go decision as to whether we want to uplink commands to the helicopter to fly the next morning or late in the morning or very early in the afternoon. Those are the kinds of decisions we'll be taking here on Earth. But they will all be decided on the day before, and then the helicopter will execute those while theoretically, I suppose, we'll all be asleep, but I somehow don't think that'll be the case, at least for the first flight. And so then we get the products back in the downlink that comes from Mars in the afternoon, and we make an assessment as to how we did. So it's not, the real-time responsive sort of countdown, go, no go kinds of things that you would see in a launch where everything is very immediate. This is a much more deliberative process that happens the day before and an assessment of the results on the day after.
Great, thank you. And up next on the phone lines is Justin Silverman with Vice News.
Hey there, thanks for taking my call. This is all super interesting stuff. I'm wondering, regardless of how the technology demonstration goes, what other kinds of powered flight have been considered for the atmospheres of other planets? Has there been discussion about jet engines or even hot air balloon type lift systems?
Would you like me to take that one?
Lori, yes,
I can speak to it. I'll speak to it a little bit. Just to be clear, there actually has already been a flight on another non-powered flight on another planet. The Europeans and the Soviet Union actually conducted a balloon experiment in the atmosphere of Venus way back in the 1980s. And so that has been done, and certainly balloons are a possible platform in various atmospheres if you've got sufficient the right density conditions there. You could also have glider planes have been considered and thought about. I think there are a variety of different types of aerial vehicles that have been considered. But I do think that this powered, controllable aerial flight is really going to be an enabling capability that allows us to not just access different parts of a planetary surface or atmosphere, from within the air, but control that exploration and be able to be more deliberate in how we do that exploration.
Thank you, Lori. And up next, we have Rick Lovett from Cosmos Magazine.
I'm a numbers guy, and I have I'm looking for something on the scale of the landing zone. Like, how big is it? How far is the rover going to drive to drop the helicopter? How far does it go away to the overlook? How high is the overlook? So that type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So currently, we're looking at the Van Zyl overlook that was shown earlier, and that is, I believe, about 60 meters away from where the helicopter will get dropped off. So that's the distance that the rover will have to drive after it has dropped off the helicopter.
That's about 200 feet
away. Thank you. How big is the landing zone?
So the airfield that I discussed, which is the area where the helicopter will take off from and then land back in, that's a 10 by 10 meter area. And then the entire flight zone from one end to another is on the order of about 90 meters.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, as shown in the image, the Van Zyl overlook is about a meter or so higher than the flight zone. So it has an elevated view, if you will, of the flight zone.
Great, thank you. And up next we have John Amos from the BBC.
Thanks very much for doing this. Can I just confirm, you've actually driven past the airfield, haven't you? You've gone east of the airfield and now you're driving back. Is that correct? And also that final flight, I think you're going to attempt 5. What is the likely profile of, assuming everything is successful, what is the likely profile of that 5th flight?
Hovar, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so it is correct that we drove past the airfield, and part of the reason we wanted to do that is we were able to get these really nice images that we looked at earlier, right from the corner of the airfield, that allowed us to actually measure centimeter-sized rocks and really map out what the potential hazards are in that area. And so now we will be driving back to that airfield to drop it off again. And let's see, the other part of the question, what was that again?
Yeah, it was, I mean, you're going to do a sequence of flights, aren't you? I think up to a maximum of 5. I'm just kind of wondering what the most complex flight would look like.
So we currently, the way that we're planning it right now is we have sort of a set of flights for the first 3 where we're focusing on demonstrating basic capability to hover, and then traversing and going slightly, longer distance where we go down the flight zone and back again. And then if we get past those, we will assess, did we meet all our objectives during those flights? Do we want to go back and retry some of those things? Or if everything goes really well, then we might try to stretch our capabilities beyond those basic capabilities. But we haven't planned that in detail at this point. We're going to play a little bit by ear and see how things go as we get into flying.
So you could do something quite dramatic as your last flight because it wouldn't matter.
I don't want to speculate here on what we'll do for that flight. We're going to see as we proceed.
Yeah, I think I want to emphasize that this is an engineering experiment, and we will expect to learn from each of these flights, and that will inform the decisions we take for successive flights, whether it's retry attempts, whether it's stretch goals. Those are all things that come as part and parcel of doing a technology demonstration. And so we'll see where we are, tune in later and see where we are and follow us on a journey. And we'll keep you posted, both on the web and in other new media outlets, to let you know as those plans evolve.
That's right, thank you. And up next on our phone lines is Leo Enright from Irish Television.
Thanks very much, Gabrielle. I'm with Jonathan on going for one of those craters. I'm sure that's what he's thinking, and I definitely think that would be cool, east or west of the landing site. My question, though, is somebody on the team at a technical meeting I was at recently said that this vehicle has more computer power than all, as I remember, I don't have the notes in front of me, than all previous American interplanetary missions combined. Can somebody, is that right? That seems extraordinary.
I can take that. So yes, so what we are comparing is the general purpose computers that are there on every spacecraft, which control how the spacecraft behaves, how it responds to commands, and so forth. So the particular computer that we are using here on Ingenuity is about 150 times faster than the one on Perseverance. And that's just a reflection of the fact that we are able to exploit in this technology demonstration some of the latest bleeding edge, cutting edge products that are out there in the commercial industry. The processor that we have is very comparable to what you have on your cell phone from a couple, 3 years ago. And that is something that we as a technology demonstration are able to take advantage of. And it's not designed for space, but we went through a process where we convinced ourselves that for this technology demonstration and our risks posture that we take with these kinds of demonstrations, it provides the computing which is necessary for a lot of the navigation and image processing functions that Howard mentioned. So yes, if you actually add up all the computers all the way back that have flown out into the solar system and you sum it all up, we do dwarf it by a large 2 orders of magnitude, just because we are at that place in technology here on Earth and we have those kinds of processes available.
And do you rule out going for one of those lovely craters?
Is that a question there?
I think so. Could you repeat the question again, please?
Sorry, I was just wondering, do you rule out going for one of those craters on your 5th flight? They look gorgeous.
Yeah, so as was mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the subsequent flights when we get there. We're focused here today on, that Wright brothers moment, frankly, getting powered, controlled flight, then adding mobility and adding other capabilities like any flight test program would put forward. And so that's the path that we're going to follow.
And we have a social media question up next. It is from Shelby on Facebook, who asks, what will Ingenuity sound like on Mars? Havard?
So when we've done flight tests here in our 25-foot space simulator, we've had microphones inside the chamber. And what it sounds like is pretty much like a small airplane taking off. It's about the same RPM as you would hear if you're standing, next to an airstrip and listening to propeller airplanes. And so you can actually go online and see some videos of our flight test, and you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about there. What it will sound like when you're standing, say where the rover is going to observe us at a distance. We don't frankly know exactly, how powerful that sound, how well it's going to carry, on Mars compared to in a metal box like the vacuum chamber that we tested on here.
Thank you. And we have another social media question as a reminder that people of all ages are tuning in. Blair on Twitter asks, on behalf of his son, Logan, age 6 years old, does this mean one day that I'll be able to fly my drone on an obstacle course on Mars? Bob?
Yeah, I think I would first encourage you should first design and help build us that drone that will be much more capable in Ingenuity and can do all those wonderful things. And once you help us do that, then yes, and then you get to Mars, please fly it. We'd love to see that moment. That would be the really good outcome of all our early pathfinding work out here.
Great, thank you. And we have one more social media question coming in. Let's see, this is from Steve on Facebook. Do the cold temperatures on Mars impact the lithium-ion battery life? Bob, would you take that?
So what we do with our lithium-ion batteries is we actually keep them warm enough through the night so that they supply enough power for the heaters that keep the whole spacecraft, aircraft warm through the night. So they're not these are commercial off-the-shelf lithium-ion batteries. They've not been specifically tailored for low-temperature applications, even though that could have been done. We didn't go that route. So we basically keep our batteries warm enough so that they can generate enough power that we need through the night. And then when it comes to the actual flight, we warm them up so that even more, so that they can provide all the high power that the Ingenuity's motors need to operate the aircraft.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Now, we have no shortage of questions coming in, but we unfortunately can't answer all of the media questions on air. For those of you with additional questions, please call JPL's Digital News and Media Office. We'll also continue to answer social media questions online. And thank you for all your questions. And thank you to our panelists for joining us today. To learn more about the Ingenuity helicopter, visit go.nasa.gov/Ingenuity. To learn more about the Perseverance rover, visit mars.nasa.gov/Perseverance, where you can also see the latest images coming down from the rover. And if you're on social media, join the conversation about the helicopter by following @NASAJPL and use the hashtag #MarsHelicopter. Thank you for watching.
The red planet Mars is back in the news, and as NASA continues its Perseverance mission, I've been thinking a lot about some of my favorite images over the years from Mars. What I think, though, is not nearly as important as this person, space historian Andy Chaikin, who is the author of A Man on the Moon, as well as A Passion for Mars, joins us from his home in a wintry Vermont to share with us his 10 favorite and reasonably significant images from Mars over the years. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm happy to be with you, Miles.
Would it be accurate to say you picked your 10 favorites, or the 10 most significant, or 10 significant favorites?
What I've done is I've picked 10 images that, you know, to me tell a story of the unveiling of Mars step by step, the twists and turns of this ongoing experience of exploration and discovery.
First on your list is what?
So Mariner 4 was the very first spacecraft to take close-up pictures of another planet in July 1965. And what we see here are two of those images, which are very crude by today's standards, but they were good enough to show Mars in a way that no telescope could ever have revealed. And it was actually a shock to the scientists, because what you see in this picture are craters, more resembling the moon than the Earth. I mean, to see so many craters and such large craters, the one on the right-hand image, the biggest crater is 70 miles across, means that we're looking at a surface that is ancient, billions of years old. This was overnight a change from the red planet to, as the New York Times called it, the dead planet.
All right, but wait, there's more. Stay with us because the plot changes as we go along here. Let's go to image number 2 now.
So in 1971, Mariner 9 became the first spacecraft to go into orbit around Mars. And with that vantage point, it could do a much more comprehensive exploration. And what you see here is a mosaic of images of the solar system's largest volcano. It was named Olympus Mons, in other words, Mount Olympus. It is 3 times higher than Mount Everest, 90,000 feet high. Now we have a planet with a story to tell.
Mars continues to unveil itself. Let's go to number 3.
In 1976, a pair of orbiters for the Viking mission went into orbit around Mars, equipped with better cameras, so there's a bit more detail in these images. This is a mosaic of pictures that shows, amidst all the craters, a network of channels that are branching just like drainage channels on Earth. So this is very compelling evidence that even though Mars today is bone dry, that in the distant past, liquid water must have flowed across the surface. And of course, that raised the tantalizing question of whether there might have been life at the time the water was flowing, or might even still exist somehow on Mars, even if it was only microbial life.
In the hubris of the era, NASA set the bar pretty high for Viking. Did it still succeed?
Oh my God, Viking was an incredible success. I mean, the landing, just from an engineering point of view, the landing was like the robotic equivalent of Apollo. And no Neil Armstrong on board to dodge boulders and craters. In fact, if you look at this panorama from Viking, you can see a boulder in the near distance that's about the size of a desk, and it's only about 30 feet away from the lander. And if the lander had come down on that boulder, it would have been curtains. So that was just blind luck. And what you see in this image is that Mars is covered with a layer of iron oxide, in other words, rust, that gives Mars its reddish color. The red planet really is red. But what Viking's instruments revealed was that in that dust, there appears to be highly reactive compounds, which are peroxides and superoxides, that apparently are hostile to organic matter, or carbon-bearing molecules. And so Viking's instruments found no trace of organics whatsoever, never mind life. In every other way but the life detection front, it was a spectacular success.
That thought takes us to our next image, number 5, because after Viking, we had a 20-year gap. Tell us about that, and tell us the significance of the images we're about to see.
Well, you know, there was so much expectation on Viking that when it didn't find evidence of life, or at least conclusive evidence of life, it put kind of a big chill on Mars exploration for quite a while. So, you know, yeah, we had to wait more than 20 years until the next Mars landing. It happened on July 4th, 1997. This was a mission called Pathfinder, whose main job was to test a new kind of landing system that used high-tech airbags. Of course, the star of the mission was a little microwave oven-sized rover called Sojourner, which you can see here inspecting a boulder with its sensors. And it really kind of became sort of the mascot of the Pathfinder mission.
Pathfinder marks the beginning of a pretty busy era of steady exploration of Mars with, you know, fairly predictable timeframes between missions. No more 20-year gaps. Let's talk about image number 6.
There's an interesting backstory here, which is that most scientists studying Mars had actually opposed sending another camera into orbit around Mars because they thought, we don't need any more pictures. We've got thousands of pictures. We've discovered everything we're going to discover from orbit. Well, they had to think again when they saw images like this. This is a mosaic of images from Mars Global Surveyor. And what you see, these fan-shaped features, these sort of finger-like projections, are a fossil river delta that have been preserved in sedimentary rock. It is the smoking gun for the fact that water was flowing across Mars, not sporadically, not just, you know, for a brief period, but for a long time, persistent flow of water, not just a sudden outburst, as had been theorized from earlier missions. And of course, water flowing for long durations, again, raises the question of, were these habitable environments? Might there have been life living in such a river delta